don't know why God took you away from me though, but I know why he put you in his life though. Really taking in the responsibility that I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't know I was taking care of a little boy. I just was doing it. He changed my life in so many ways.
July 21st, 2025. Police arrive at a cemetery in Southeast and find a body slumped against a small headstone. The grave belongs to a 6-year-old boy who died just 6 months earlier. But here's what makes this absolutely gut-wrenching. The man they found? That's the boy's father, a local rapper named Big Boss Dono. And he didn't just happen to be there. He chose to be there at his son's grave for his final moments. His baby mother posted something that'll haunt you. It wasn't intentional. It was a mistake without thought. He just wanted his son. So what pushes a man, a father, an artist, someone loved by his community, to that breaking point? What happened in those 6 months between burying his child and ending up at that grave himself? Real quick, drop your city in the comments right now. I want to know where you're watching from. New York, Atlanta, London? Wherever you are, let me know you're here, and if this story hits different for you, if you've lost someone or watched someone struggle, like, subscribe, and stick around, because what we're about to uncover isn't just about one man's pain, it's about all of us. This is the story of Donald Curtis, Big Boss Dono, a rapper, a muralist, a father, and a man who loved his son so much that living without him became impossible. Let's go back to where it all started. Donald Curtis didn't grow up with a silver spoon. He grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C., a place where survival meant making hard choices every single day. We're talking about a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than opportunity, where young men had 2 paths, make it out or get swallowed up by the streets. Dono walked both paths before he found his way. Before the music, before the murals, before any of it, Dono was just another kid trying to navigate a world that didn't care if he lived or died. The streets of Southeast in the late 90s and early 2000s weren't a game. Gang violence, drug trade, police raids. That was the daily reality, and Dono, he was right in the middle of it. But here's the thing about Donald Curtis. He had talent, real talent. Not just the kind that gets you noticed at a block party, but the kind that could actually change your life if you knew how to use it. By 2015, Dono started making noise in DC's underground rap scene, and I'm not talking about some wannabe trying to sound hard. His music was different, it was raw, it was honest. When he rapped about the streets, you felt it because he lived it. When he talked about struggle, you believed him because it was written all over his story. His lyrics weren't just words, they were survival notes from someone who'd seen too much too young. But Dono handled it. He kept pushing forward, kept making music, kept painting walls, because at the end of the day he knew what mattered. And then everything changed. On January 11th, 2018, Donald Curtis became a father. His son, Razik Williams, came into the world, and from that moment on, nothing else mattered as much. Not the music, not the street reputation, not the controversies or the clout. Razik became his entire world. Dono had another child too, but his bond with Razik, that was something different, something deeper. You could see it in every photo, every video, every social media post, the way he looked at that little boy. It was pure love, the kind of love that changes a man from the inside out. In his own words, Dono once said,
I missed so many bullets, police, all types of stuff because I was busy with him.
Fatherhood pulled Donald Curtis out of the darkness. It gave him purpose beyond the music and the murals. Razik became his motivation, his anchor, his everything. And for a few years, life was good. Dono was building something real. A career, a legacy, a family. January 2021, Razik Williams was 3 years old, full of energy, full of life, full of that innocent joy that only kids have. And then came the diagnosis that no parent should ever have to hear: cancer. 3 years old, barely out of diapers, and already fighting for his life. For Dono and his girlfriend Sierra, Razik's mother, the world stopped. Everything they knew, everything they planned, everything they hoped for, gone in an instant, replaced by hospital rooms, doctor appointments, treatment schedules, and a fear so deep it's hard to put into words. But here's what you need to understand about Dono: he didn't run. He didn't fall apart, at least not where anyone could see. He became exactly what his son needed: a rock, a protector, a father who would move heaven and earth to save his child. The next 3 years became a war, not the kind fought with guns or fists, but the kind fought in sterile hospital rooms with needles and chemicals, and prayers that sometimes felt like they weren't being heard. Razik went through treatments that would break most adults: chemotherapy, radiation, procedures that no child should have to endure. And through it all, Dono and Sierra were right there beside him. But while Dono was being strong for his son in public, he was falling apart in private. The sleepless nights, the anxiety that gripped his chest every time a doctor walked into the room, the constant fear that the next scan, the next test, the next appointment would bring news he couldn't handle. Dono carried all of that alone because he thought that's what fathers were supposed to do: be strong, don't break, don't show weakness. He posted updates on Instagram, trying to stay positive, trying to keep hope alive. But if you read between the lines, you could see the cracks forming, the weight pressing down on him, the terror hiding behind every smile. In one post, he wrote about needing to be strong while feeling weak, about crying when no one was watching, about the guilt of not being able to take his son's pain away. These weren't just social media captions. They were confessions from a man drowning in helplessness. And Razik? That little boy fought like a champion. He had this obsession with Spider-Man, loved everything about the character: the mask, the webs, the hero who always saved the day. Maybe it gave him something to hold on to. Maybe it made him feel powerful when his own body was betraying him. Whatever the reason, Spider-Man became part of Razik's identity during those years. His family started calling him their superhero because that's what he was: a tiny warrior battling something most grown men couldn't face. On November 7th, 2023, Dono posted something on Instagram that still hits hard when you read it today. He wrote directly to Razik: "I need you to know that I love you more than anything in this world. This journey has been hard, but you are stronger than me. You are my superhero." Stronger than me? That's what Dono believed, that his 3-year-old son had more strength than he did. And maybe he was right, because while Razik kept fighting, Dono was quietly breaking. The man who'd survived the streets, who dodged bullets and police and every danger Southeast DC could throw at him, he couldn't survive watching his son suffer. Every hospital visit chipped away at him. Every treatment that didn't work took another piece of his hope. Every time Raziak smiled through the pain, it reminded Dono of what he stood to lose. By late 2023, Razik's condition started getting worse. The treatments weren't working the way doctors hoped. The cancer was aggressive, relentless. And despite everything, despite the prayers, the treatments, the love, the fight, it was winning. Dono knew it, Sierra knew it, but neither of them wanted to say it out loud, because saying it would make it real. And then came January 2024, the month that would destroy Donald Curtis forever. January 9th, 2024. Razik Williams took his last breath, 6 years old. After 3 years of fighting, after countless treatments, after being poked and prodded and put through hell, his little body just couldn't take anymore. The cancer won. And Donald Curtis lost the only thing that mattered. For Dono, it was worse than anything the streets ever threw at him. Worse than any beef, any violence, any close call with death. Because this wasn't something he could fight. This wasn't an enemy he could face. This was just loss. Pure, devastating, irreversible loss. The funeral was held a few days later, and it was exactly what you'd expect for a child who loved Spider-Man. The casket was decorated with Spider-Man imagery, red and blue webs and masks. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. A reminder that this wasn't just any funeral, this was a superhero's send-off. The community came out in force. Friends, family, neighbors, people who'd followed Razik's journey online, they all showed up. Southeast DC doesn't always get credit for how tight-knit it is, but when one of their own is hurting, they show up. And they showed up for Dono. But nothing could prepare anyone for what happened when Dono stood up to speak. He walked to the front, stood in front of that tiny Spider-Man casket, and completely fell apart. This man who'd been so strong, so composed, so determined to hold it together, he couldn't anymore. The mask came off, the walls came down, and what came out was raw, unfiltered grief. He spoke directly to Razik, not to the crowd, not to the cameras, to his son. His voice cracked. People in the room were sobbing, but he kept going. "You guided me, son. You saved me. And I don't know how to do this without you. I don't know how to be here when you're not." That last part, that wasn't just grief talking, that was foreshadowing. A warning sign that nobody caught in the moment because everyone was too focused on comforting him, on getting through the day, on just surviving the funeral. After the service, they buried Razik in a cemetery in Southeast DC. His headstone read, Razik D. Williams, January 11, 2018 to January 2, 2024, the world's biggest superhero. And now he was gone. In the weeks and months that followed, people watched Dono closely. They were worried. You could see it in the way he moved, the way he talked, the way he posted on social media. Something was off. The light that used to be there, the energy, the passion, the fire, it was gone, replaced by something hollow. He tried to keep going, tried to make music, tried to paint murals, tried to be there for his other child, for Sierra, for the people who loved him. But it was like watching someone go through the motions without actually being present, like his body was there, but his soul had left with Razik. Friends reached out, family checked in. People told him it would get easier, that time would help, that he needed to stay strong. But how do you tell a man who just lost his entire world to stay strong? How do you tell someone whose reason for living is gone that life goes on? You can't, because for Dono, life didn't go on, it stopped on January 9, 2024. He visited the grave constantly, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sierra. He'd sit there for hours, talking to Razik like he was still there, telling him about his day, apologizing for not being able to save him, asking him for guidance on how to keep living. People who saw him there said it was like watching a man say goodbye in slow motion. Dono tried to hide how bad it was getting. He'd smile when people asked how he was doing. He'd say he was taking it one day at a time. He'd post throwback photos of Razik with captions about keeping his memory alive. But anyone paying close attention could see the truth. He wasn't healing, he was sinking. Depression doesn't always look like what you think it does. Sometimes it looks like someone who's still functioning, still showing up, still going through the motions. But inside, they're already gone. That's where Dono was, physically present, emotionally destroyed. And nobody knew how to pull him back. Have you ever watched someone you love fight for their life? Have you ever felt that helpless, that powerless, that broken? If this is hitting home for you right now, drop a broken heart emoji in the comments. Let people know they're not alone in this. Because what happened next, it's the part nobody saw coming. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't want to believe it. 6 months after burying his son, Donald Curtis made a decision. A final decision. One that would leave his family, his friends, and his entire community asking the same question. Could we have stopped this? And every single one of those days was torture. but it was all performance. Behind closed doors, he was drowning. Sierra saw it too. She was dealing with her own grief. Razik was her son too, but she could see Dono slipping away. She tried to reach him, tried to get him to talk about what he was feeling, tried to remind him that he still had people who needed him. But grief is selfish like that. It makes you forget that other people are hurting too. It makes you feel like you're the only one carrying the weight. People who saw him there said it looked like he was waiting for something, or maybe waiting for permission. Permission to let go. Permission to stop fighting. Permission to join his son. He stopped posting as much on social media. When he did post, it was always about Razik, always looking back, never looking forward, because there was no forward for him. There was only before and after. Before Razik died, and after. And the after was unbearable. His other child needed him, Sierra needed him, his family needed him, his community needed him, but none of that mattered because the one person who needed him most was gone. And without Razik, Dono didn't know who he was supposed to be anymore. Then came July 21st. A few hours later, Donald Curtis drove to the cemetery. He parked his car, walked to Razik's grave, and sat down beside the headstone that read, "The world's biggest superhero." And he didn't leave. July 21st, 2025. Late afternoon. Someone called the police. A groundskeeper, maybe a visitor, reports vary, but whoever it was, they saw something that didn't look right. A man sitting against a child's headstone. Not moving, not responding. When officers arrived at the cemetery in southeast D.C., they found Donald Curtis slumped against his son's grave, the same grave he'd been visiting almost every day for 6 months, the same spot where he'd spent hours talking to Razik, crying, begging for answers that never came. He was gone. The police investigation didn't take long. There was no foul play, no mystery, no unanswered questions about what happened. Dono had made his choice, and he'd made it in the one place that still felt like home to him. Next to his son. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide. And just like that, Washington, D.C. lost another one of its own. Not to the streets this time. Not to violence or drugs or any of the usual suspects that claimed so many lives in Southeast, but to grief. To a pain so deep that living with it became impossible. Word spread fast. Social media exploded. People who knew Dono, people who'd followed Razik's journey, people who'd never even met them, but felt connected to their story, everyone was devastated. The comments poured in. Disbelief, anger, sadness, and underneath it all a question that nobody wanted to ask, but everyone was thinking, why didn't we see this coming? But some people did see it coming, they just didn't know how to stop it. Sierra posted on Instagram later that night. Her words were short, but they said everything. Please forgive him. It wasn't intentional, it was a mistake without thought. He just wanted his son. Read that again, he just wanted his son. That's what this was. Not a man giving up, not a man being selfish or weak or any of the other things people say when they don't understand. This was a father who couldn't exist in a world where his child didn't. A father whose entire identity, whose entire purpose, whose entire reason for changing his life was buried in that grave. And when Razik died, a part of Dono died too. The part that wanted to keep going, the part that saw a future, the part that believed things could get better. What was left? Just a shell. A man going through the motions, waiting for the pain to stop. And when it didn't stop, when 6 months passed and the weight only got heavier, he made the only decision that made sense to him in that moment. He went to be with his son. Now I know some of you watching this have been there. Maybe not in the exact same way, but you've felt that kind of pain. The kind that makes you wonder if it's worth it to keep going. The kind that makes you feel like nobody would understand even if you tried to explain it. And if that's you right now, if you're in that dark place, I need you to hear this. It's not weak to ask for help. It's not giving up to say you're struggling. It's not a burden to tell someone you're not okay. Drop "I'm here" in the comments right now if you want to show support for anyone who needs it. Let people know they're not alone, because that's what Dono needed and didn't get, not because people didn't care, but because he didn't let them in. He carried it all by himself until it crushed him. The news hit the DC community like a freight train. This wasn't just some random tragedy, this was Big Boss Dono, the guy who painted murals that inspired kids to dream bigger, the rapper whose music spoke truth when nobody else would, the father who loved his son so much that he walked away from the streets to be there for him. And now he was gone. Just like Rezek. 2 lives lost, 2 funerals, 2 graves in the same city, 6 months apart. People started asking questions. Hard questions. Could someone have intervened? Were there warning signs that got missed? Should Sierra have done more? Should his friends have pushed harder? Should the community have rallied around him differently? But here's the truth. Grief doesn't work like that. You can have all the support in the world and still feel completely alone. You can have people checking on you every day and still wake up wishing you hadn't. Because the support doesn't bring back what you lost. It doesn't fill the hole. It doesn't make the pain stop. Dono's death wasn't anyone's fault. Not Sierra's, not his friends, not his family's. It was the result of a broken heart that never got the chance to heal. A father's love so strong that living without his child felt like torture. And that's the part that destroys you when you really think about it. The love didn't kill him, the loss did, the absence. The empty space where Rezek used to be. Within days, the cemetery became a memorial site. People left flowers at both graves, Rezek's, and now Dono's once it was prepared, candles, teddy bears, Spider-Man toys, notes from people who never met them but felt their story in their bones. One note read, "You're with your superhero now. Rest easy, big boss." Another said, "I'm so sorry the world couldn't hold you without him." And maybe that's the most honest way to put it. The world couldn't hold Donald Curtis without Rezek Williams. And instead of judging him for that, maybe we need to understand it. Maybe we need to ask ourselves what we're doing, or not doing, for the people around us who are barely holding on. Because Dono's story didn't have to end this way. Not if we lived in a world where men felt safe talking about their pain. Not if we lived in a world where grief was treated like the serious, life-threatening condition it can be. Not if we lived in a world where asking for help didn't feel like admitting defeat. But we don't live in that world yet, and until we do, stories like this will keep happening. Washington, D.C. was about to say goodbye to Big Boss Dono, but this time there would be no eulogy, no speech, no final words from the man himself. Just silence, and a community left to pick up the pieces. Washington, D.C. didn't just mourn, it came together. Within days, vigils were organized across Southeast. People gathered at the spots where Dono's murals still stood, lighting candles and sharing memories, and his artwork became more than just paint on walls, it became sacred ground, a reminder of what the community had lost. Local artists added tributes to his existing murals. Spider-Man figures appeared next to Dono's signature tags. Messages like "Forever a Father" and "Reunited with his hero" were spray-painted in his honor. The hip-hop community showed up too. Fellow rappers posted tributes, shared his music, talked about the man behind the microphone. Not just the artist, but the father, the mentor, the guy who proved you could leave the streets without leaving your people behind. But the most powerful response? The conversations his death started. People began talking openly about grief, about depression, about the weight fathers carry in silence. Barbershops, community centers, churches. Everywhere you went in Southeast DC, people were asking the same question. How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Dono's death became a catalyst, a painful, heartbreaking catalyst for change. Here's what nobody tells you about losing a child. It's the kind of pain that rewires your brain. Studies show parents who lose children face higher risks of depression, substance abuse, and yes, suicide. It's not weakness, It's biology meeting unbearable loss. Men especially struggle because we're taught to man up and push through. Dono did exactly that, stayed strong publicly while crumbling privately. That's the dangerous part. The warning signs were there. The constant grave visits, the social media posts looking backward, never forward, that final Instagram message, "I just want to see my son again." These weren't cries for attention, they were distress signals. What could have helped? Honest conversations, professional grief counseling, friends who pushed past, "I'm fine," to ask, "No, really, how are you?" Community spaces where fathers could admit they're breaking without feeling judged. Checking on your strong friends isn't optional, it's necessary. Big Boss Dono's murals still stand in Southeast DC, his music still plays, his story still matters. But his real legacy? It's the conversation, the reminder that love alone isn't enough without support, that strength isn't suffering in silence, that checking on people, really checking, can save lives. Razik and Dono are together now, father and son, reunited. Rest in peace, Big Boss Dono and Razik Williams, the world's biggest superhero and the father who loved him beyond measure. Subscribe if this moved you, hit that bell, and please talk to someone if you're struggling.